Punch Drunk Love is a 2002 released comedy drama directed by Paul Thomas Anderson.
Adam Sandler plays Barry Egan, who is sort of he's a bachelor and he's an entrepreneur. He's got his own business. They make novelty toilet plungers and other items. He's got 7 sisters. I'm sure they think they mean well, but they all kind of emotionally abuse him, to be honest. Yeah, he's kind of socially awkward, a bit of social anxiety going on, mainly because of the way they treat him. They hassle him quite a lot at the start of the film. He goes to a party with them all, and yeah, he kind of has a little bit of a breakdown because of all the jokes they say about him. Just doesn't really feel very nice about himself, particularly when he's around them. But at the start of the film, he meets Lena, who's played by Emily Watson, and takes to shine to her instantly, but doesn't see her again straight away. So in the meantime, he's just feeling so low and miserable about himself, he phones a sex line. It's more really just a talk, isn't it? He's not really thinking about any sort of self-gratification. It's more just he wants somebody to talk to that isn't one of his sisters. So he can just, someone who doesn't really know him. But that goes a bit sour when the woman on the other end tries to extort money out of him. So that's kind of a subplot that runs through the film. But it turns out that Lena actually works with one of his sisters, Elizabeth, who's played by Mary Lynn Ricecub. She was actually trying to set her up with him anyway. Again, she constantly apologises for him being weird, because he is a little bit weird, but she's constantly apologising for him being weird and everything, and it's all just very awkward. There's definitely some sort of spark there between them, and that's the main thrust of the film, is them developing this relationship, even though Barry is a little bit awkward and, yeah, a little bit odd.
Just to go back to the sex line, actually, like exactly what you said, that he's looking for love. When he looks down, there's a newspaper and it says "Find Love," which I think is exactly it. He is a lonely guy and he is after love. He's not after a quick one there. Because it's February and Valentine's Day appears in February. February the 14th, we thought we would do a month of alternative rom-coms, because I don't think neither of us are really fan of the typical rom-com. I mean, there were some good ones out there. I'm not going to tarnish them all with that outlook, but we thought we'd have a look at some kind of more alternative ones, and I think this one pretty much falls in that genre of the alternative rom-com. And this is one that I love this film. It's actually, I think of like my top 5 favourite films of all time. This is in there. I think myself and my brother have this weird idea that this possibly is like the greatest film ever made. I know that's controversial, and I know a lot of people would be like, but it's just for me, it's a perfect film, and it just gets everything right, and I really enjoy it for that. I mean, I love Paul Thomas Anderson; he's a great filmmaker, but this is my favourite Paul Thomas Anderson film, next to Inherent Vice, which is probably my second favourite. I mean, they're all great films, but those two are like my favourite. They're his kind of his alternative films. They're weird. They're strange, they're surreal, and they're very colourful. And I just really like those two films, and I think they're quite similar. This film has this kind of weird physical comedy running through it, as does Inherent Vice as well. And I like that physical comedy that Adam Sandler puts into this film. Just like Joaquin Phoenix does in Inherent Vice, he's very kind of physical comedy in there. I don't know what it is about this, and I can't really say why myself and my brother think it's the greatest film ever made. We kind of think it's the greatest film ever made and no one else knows it. That's quite a sweeping statement, I know. I think it's just, I think it's a perfect little film, and there's nothing about it that I really dislike. And every time I watch it, I feel the same. I've never watched it and gone, oh. Sometimes you watch a film that you like and you watch it again, it's like, I'm not so keen this time. But that's never happened for me with this film.
I mean, I've seen it... I'd only seen it the once, back when it first came out. I remembered it being, a bit offbeat, a bit strange. Obviously memorable for Adam Sandler's performance, but I didn't remember a lot about it. But no, I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't know about the greatest film ever made. No, I can see why people would like it. The thing that struck me was it's almost like a piece of art, an art installation, because it uses colour and light a great deal in interesting ways. The music is very closely tied into the film. Usually the film is made and then they score it. Whereas this, I think that it was much more collaborative, and that the score was being worked on while they were making the film. And obviously a harmonia features heavily in the film, as it does on the soundtrack as well. It's not a normal film in many senses. It's this sort of unique piece of art that you watch for 95 minutes.
The harmonium is actually not on the soundtrack.
Oh, isn't it? Oh,
No,
I
it's
thought it was.
in the film, and he plays it with the
Yeah.
soundtrack, but the harmonium is not actually featured on the actual
Oh, okay.
soundtrack.
That's how seamless it is that it sounds like it is part of the soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. But I totally agree. I mean, even this kind of the weird transition, this kind of strange like mixture, coloured mixture that goes on. That was by an actual artist, a man called Jeremy Blake, who has since passed away. The whole film feels like a big collaborative project, and for that reason, I suppose, yeah, it does feel a little bit like an art installation. But what I also really like about it is it's one of those. I think that's the problem with a lot of rom-coms, is that I find rom-coms don't necessarily understand what it's really like to be in a relationship, or the whole idea of getting into a relationship. Which is, this film is more about the kind of the chase and the actual getting into that relationship. And there aren't many films that really understand that whole process and what it's like inside, and especially if you're someone that's maybe, you know, a bit awkward or a bit like. I mean, he's just so awkward in this film. It's a little bit similar to Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. You know, that's another film that film really understood what it was like to break up from a relationship. You know, no films had really, you know, you watched it, and if you'd been through a relationship and come out of a relationship, you're like, oh my God, that's exactly what that feels like. And I think that's why I like it, because it really understands what it's like to go through that process. And it's got this amazing kind of two central performances who really kind of understand what that's like. And I think they're both great in this. I'm a huge fan of Emily Watson. And here's the thing. When you read about this film, a lot of people will talk about how they didn't like Adam Sandler. There's a whole thing on the disc because the film went to Cannes. And there's quite a few of the questions that come up is about Adam Sandler being this person that, you know, no one expected to be watching an Adam Sandler film. I don't quite get the hate, because I like his previous films. I think I've always thought he was very funny.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think up until this, most of his comedies that he made, were pretty good. I mean, he's made a few stinkers since this. I mean, this isn't a serious role as such, but it's not an out and out comedy, is it? Like a lot of the stuff that he's made. So it's a slightly more serious role, but he hasn't made many like that. I mean, obviously the most recent, again, he sort of got lots of acclaim for is Uncut Gems. But again, then the same year, last year, I think he made was another Netflix thing called Hoobie Halloween, which got awful reviews. I don't know. I haven't seen that either, so I can't comment. All I can go on is what I've read. Uncut Gems, everyone thought was great. Hoobie Halloween, everyone thought was awful. As he's getting older, maybe he will be offered more serious roles, because in this he's great. It's definitely Adam Sandler in there. He has that these sudden outbursts of rage, which he often does in many of his roles. It's still played differently, because he's such a quiet, awkward guy for the rest of the time. It is a different role, but there's definitely, you can definitely see Adam Sandler in it as such, if that makes sense, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, around this time, it was either after this or before it, he was in Anger Management, of course, with Jack Nicholson, which also kind of showed his kind of breakout, kind of angry side that he has to him. But I think in real life, he always comes across a little bit awkward in interviews. He always seems quite innocent as well. A little bit like a child. I mean, that's what he is in this film. He's like a child who hasn't grown up. He's
a little bit.
He's a man-child who gets angry when he doesn't get his own way, and slams things and punches walls. And that's like it's a child that hasn't been able to grow up. And maybe if you've got 7 sisters, then that's going to make. I mean, they are vile to him in this film. They're horrible. Nice to him. You haven't actually spoken about the main kind of thing in the plot, which is the puddings.
No, I haven't. No, I was about to bring that up. Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think that's where the original basis for this film came from, is this newspaper article that Paul Thomas Anderson had read.
There's this brand in the film, there's this brand called Healthy Choice, and they do all sorts of meals and, microwave meals and cans of soup and pots of pudding. And they're running this promotion where you buy so many, is it 10, I think? 10 different items or 10 Healthy Choice products. And you send off the coupons and you get so many air miles or frequent flyer miles. But he finds like an exploit in it where I think there's like packs of 4 puddings and each pudding has its own barcode or something.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
So he can like exploit it because he doesn't need to buy as many. So he then works out that it's like, I can't remember the sum he does, but basically it's as far as he's concerned, it's an absolute bargain. He's going to get like 1 million air miles for $3,000 or something, which, if you've got $3,000 to spend, on pudding, then go for it, I guess. At one point in the film, he tries to use his miles. He thinks that if he, again, going back to him being a bit childlike and naive, he phones up the line for this, for these air miles, thinking that he can redeem the coupon straight away and get the miles immediately. But they're like, no, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to process it. He's like, yeah, but I want to fly today. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't really work like that.
And I think that's what Paul Thomas Anderson has done really well in this film, is he's managed to utilise Adam Sandler's character and what he's known for. That kind of, I mean, a lot of his films are that kind of man, that man who hasn't grown up, who still wants to be a child and still dresses like a child. So it's kind of like Paul Thomas Anderson has taken that childlike likeness of him as this man-child character, and then he's put it into a much darker film. So he ends up getting into quite realistic scenarios, like calling an adult chat line and getting himself into trouble with a bunch of con artists. So he ends up having to have this serious adult relationship, but can't quite work his way through it. There are things that happen which he perhaps shouldn't have done, and in fact Emily Watson pulls him up a couple of times on things that he's done. So Paul Thomas Anderson is really able to merge those two, putting Adam Sandler's character in this real world, but it's much darker than his usual films, and that I think why it works quite well, because it feels very realistic, but at the same time it's kind of got this surreal art installation vibe to it as well. And I think the whole thing's, I just think it's really interestingly put together. Do you know about the theory of this film?
No.
So there was someone on Reddit a few years ago that basically suggested that the whole thing was about Superman. Because he's awkward, he's in blue all the time and she's in red, and Lena Leonard's name initials are LL, so that's like Lois Lane. I think someone suggested that's right, the frequent flyers is like the Superman flying. I don't know.
God.
It's pretty crazy, and Paul Thomas Anderson has never confirmed it, but he doesn't really talk about this film much. He's kind of shrouded in mystery. So I think it sounds quite cool if you read it. It's like an interesting theory, but I personally don't think it's that. I think that the blue clothes that he wears suggests that he is lonely and he's very cold. The opening shot of the film is literally him in the corner at his desk on the phone, in the very corner of this very cold blue existence. And then she comes in and she's wearing red. And so I think she's just the warmth that's kind of the red and the warmth coming into his life. And I think that's pretty much it. It's about love, and it's about how love conquers all, and how when you become, when you know that feeling of what it's like to be in love, you feel like you can break down walls with it. It's an extremely powerful feeling, and emotion, and I think that's what this film gets right. And like I said before, it does things. There are things in the film, and I love when films do this. When something will happen, and you're like, oh my god, I've done that. Do you know what I mean? And you feel like, and I think that's why I really enjoy this film. There's a scene where he goes, for the first time he takes Lena out on a date, and at the end of it, he takes her back to her apartment, and then he kind of gives her a quick peck on the cheek, and then he basically, as he leaves, he says, and bye-bye. And then he walks down the corridor, and he's like, he repeats it, he's like, and bye-bye. And what the hell did I say that for? And we've all done that, and it's so funny. And then, of course, he gets out, and he has to. He basically ends up. She tells him she managed to get hold of him and says that she wanted to kiss him, and then he has to run back, and of course he can't find the apartment. It just all goes wrong. I'm not saying I've ever been in a situation quite like that, but I've been in similar situations where similar things happen. You just. That's that feeling, that embarrassment of saying something that was really stupid that you didn't want to say to someone you liked is so realistic, and I think that's why I really like this film. Is how realistic it feels at times.
Yeah, it's more, despite its oddities and weirdness, it's probably more authentic than a lot of rom-coms, really, isn't it?
I think it's an interesting romantic film, this, and it's got a great cast. I mean, Emily Watson's amazing. She was, I think Paul Thomas Anderson had seen her in Breaking the Waves, which is a great film. And she's so good. And she doesn't really have much to do, but just be the love interest. But she does it so well. And she, there's just the way she walks and the way she's quite flirtatious with him, and the way she looks at him is really good. Philip Seymour Hoffman, of course, is in there. Not much, but he's amazing in it. You know,
I mean, there's a great scene when they're on the phone with each other, him and Adam Sandler, and that's hilarious. It's just shouting at each other over the phone. And you got Louis Guzman, who's one of his workmates, who is mainly bemused at his behaviour most of the time, as a lot of people are.
We have been doing Amazon Prime films, but this one is not on Amazon Prime, but I have it on Blu-ray. It's the Criterion Blu-ray, which was released a few years ago now, I think. Yeah, although this is the UK version, because obviously Criterion now release discs in this country. It's a nice Blu-ray. Some really interesting, some good stuff on there. There's interviews with John Bryan, who wrote the soundtrack, and there's a documentary about the artist Jeremy Blake, whose artwork is featured in the film. Because, like I said, he and his girlfriend passed away in the late 2007. I think they both died. And there's some deleted scenes. There's also the famous Mattress Man commercial, which is about which is kind of this crazy commercial that Philip Seymour Hoffman records about the character he's playing, and it's very funny, and it's well worth seeing that. Yeah, and so there's lots of nice things on there, and it looks great, of course, being a Criterion Blu-ray disc.
I mean, I've got the DVD that originally came out, back in whenever it was, 2003, something like that. I think all the features from that are on the Criterion. Has it got like the short film
Blood and Blossoms?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Which it kind of is like a sort of miniature version of the film, isn't it? Really, with it's got all the artwork and integrated into the images, and it was almost like sort of alternate takes, because a lot of it was the same scenes, some of them that were in the film, but from different angles and things like that. So it almost felt like it was just unused footage cut into with music and obviously a lot of that artwork. I don't know.
But I think Paul Thomas Anderson does that a lot, doesn't he? He often, I think, doesn't he? He puts his own trailers together using alternative takes from.
Right.
And I think he's done that for all his films. He'll kind of put together either short films or trailers using alternative takes from the film. Right. And so none of those shots are actually in the final film.
That's what I was hoping to get out. When I put the extras disc in, I was hoping to get some, just some insight into the film, but there wasn't really anything. There was the deleted scenes, there was the short film, there was the Mattress Man commercial, I think there was trailers. I can't remember if there was anything else, but there was no commentary, there was no behind the scenes stuff, no interviews with anyone. So I was like, I was hoping to sort of, just for somebody to give me a bit of background on the film, or just, some insight into the making of it or something. But there was nothing on there like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's why those wacky theories exist of the film a little bit, because there is not much out there. And like I said, he's not really spoken about it. But I think maybe it's one of those films that doesn't need to be spoken about too much. You just take from it what you take from it.
Yeah, you interpret it however you want to, I guess, yeah.
So that was Punch Drunk Love. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button up there, and don't forget to push the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us again next week for another video.